Oh, right spot. So I'm interested in a lot of things, but I think that I begin every talk I give with this image of my mother, because I think if you understand what kind of home we had, you might understand a little bit of how my brain works. So my mother was a very irreverent, very beautiful, very funny woman. And when I was working on the piece for the New York Times, the year of articles about American democracy, I asked people to sit down and just draw a map of the United States by heart. And probably all of you would be able to do it somewhat better, somewhat worse. But the best map that I got by far, the most original, the most amazing and interesting one is that one. Can you see it? Am I standing I don't know if I'm standing in the way. So clearly, my mother, so this really explains it all. My mother had, it's an egg-shaped thing. Texas and California are underneath Canada. Can you see it? New Hampshire and Alaska. Can you see how crazy this is? South Carolina is on top of North Carolina. And through the center of the map is sorry, the rest unknown, thank you. And really, in our home, it was like we couldn't care less. I would say you could all go to hell. And the lack of information, the lack of conversation about what you were supposed to know in this household was really startling. And what we did was we didn't really, we didn't talk to each other very much, but everybody was free to do what they wanted. And I was free to daydream. And I think that some kind of amazing leap of faith that my mother had about allowing me to be the person that I was without any kind of structure or direction. I mean, there was a lot of artless, art and piano and dancing and all of that, and going to museums, but there wasn't any explanation of what it was supposed to mean. That was up to you to figure out. So this map really, I have it on my wall, and I think all the time when I'm being too literal and too tight and too trying to give the truth, which that's a wobbly thing anyway. I look at this map, and in the world of maps and in the world of taking what are the moments of life and saying, what's going on over here? How are we reacting to it? I mean, my job is, I think, as a writer and an illustrator, a humorist, and a journalist. And I think what I do is my job is to wander around the world and collect these moments and then present them to you and say, this is what I think is going on. So, of course, this collaboration with Rick Meyerowitz for The New Yorker was an extraordinary moment in history, a tragic, horrific moment. And what we were able to do, because we were starting to have a conversation about what are all these tribes and what's going on, that we were able to take New York and make that into a tribal place where we were able to make fun of ourselves and able to laugh. And they said, of course, if you can't laugh at the moments that are the worst, then you're finished. So, I mean, I have a lot of favorites here, but khakis and car keys for Connecticut, I think, is really something that I'm very proud of, though if easy Pashtuns for easy pass. Anyway, I find that there is the intersection of writing and ideas and drawing is a very satisfying one. So this is how I start my day. I have a cup of coffee. I read the obits to understand that it all ends. I have, as if I need a reminder, because that's a constant. I mean, I think if you've read my writing, that every other page there's something about death or dying, and how is this possible? But anyway, we muddle through, and then we start the day. So I found, I had lunch at this restaurant, and that's the chicken they gave me, and I thought, well, this is the greatest chicken I've ever seen in my life, and so I can't stop thinking about this chicken, this poor dead chicken. It didn't know it was going to die, but there it is. So then I am going down the street, and I see many sofas. And if you actually start to look now, you may see that there are a lot of discarded sofas. So they're in this state of living roomness, but they're actually on the street. So I have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of discarded sofas and do a lot of paintings of them. And then I follow people, and I follow people in a benign way, with love, with great love. And this was in a park in Moscow. He wasn't so thrilled, and I wanted to talk to him, and he kept running away from me, and I kept running after him and photographing him. So I think, well, what's inside his suitcase? It's like old socks and a sandwich or something like that in his briefcase. But at any rate, he appears, and you'll see this just in this short talk, he appears very often in my work, and this is The only reason for time is that everything does not happen at once, I think is a really delightful quote. But so the people that I encounter, the moments that I encounter are really the things that propel me, and I think I fall in love 1,000 times a day. And so I was doing a piece about Abraham Lincoln for the Rosenbach Library, which became part of the New York Times thing, which became a children's book. And I went to do research at the Rosenbach, which is a really serious and beautiful place in Philadelphia. And the idea that I'm given these incredible archives of Lincoln, and I'm thinking and I'm scribbling in my notebook, and this is what I came up with. This is the only thing that I did when I was at the library. I said, Mrs. Maira Lincoln, request the pleasure of your company at the Sunday Social, RSVP. And I thought, I'm sent here by the New York Times or by somebody to do research, and this is what I come up with. But I think that in a sense, this is actually a very honest way of portraying Lincoln, because I'm imagining that I was married to him, and I would have been a better wife than Mary Todd, and we really would have gotten along very, very well. I think they loved each other, but I don't want to get involved in this marital situation now. I don't want to get between Abraham and Mary, because there's a time problem. But if you can put yourself in those situations when you're sent on assignment, and you can put yourself in it emotionally, I mean, then you never know. You might have a party where you're Mrs. Maira Lincoln. So the first year of columns that I did for the New York Times was called The Principles of Uncertainty, and it was exactly about that. It was my life walking around once a month, documenting what I had seen and what was part of what was really on my mind. And February, which is a kind of wretched time in New York and other places too, was a month that I was really interested in, the impossibility of February. And so I spoke about how somebody sent me a package that was wrapped in a newspaper, and the newspaper had a photograph of a man who was lying dead in the snow. And the man that was lying dead in the snow was Robert Walser, who was this amazing writer, Swiss writer of the turn of the last century. And he ended up spending the last 25 years of his life in a mental institution, which isn't the only reason he's so endearing, but he was really, really a wonderful writer. And so I ended up doing a series of paintings about his life. And I, not knowing that this was going to happen, and not knowing that, so this is him lying dead in the snow. When he went for a walk, somebody came by and took a photo, and it's a famous photo of him lying dead in the snow. And then I talk about telling the truth and lying. And my mother always said to me that if everybody told everybody what they were thinking, nobody would be speaking to anybody. And if you just think about that for a second, it puts a pretty bad spin on every conversation you'll ever have for the rest of your life. Because clearly you're hiding all the wretched and miserable things you're thinking about each other, which you kind of have to do, because otherwise it would be very difficult to get through the day. So I ruminate about that. And then I talk a little bit about how my parents didn't have such a great relationship, but they had a lot of parties, which is kind of quizzical. And at these parties, we lived in the Bronx, in Riverdale, they served mocha cream cakes. So at the end of this year of the Principles of Uncertainty, was compiled into a book, and Nico Muhly, who's a spectacular composer, wrote a series of songs about using the text from the book. And at the end of the performance, which was at the New York Public Library, we went outside, and I had gone to Mother's Bakery in the Bronx, where all our original cakes came from, and we served 30 mocha cream cakes at the end of it. So and then there's also a question of how nice do you have to be to people? Do I have to give everybody cake every minute? And I thought, I didn't bring anybody today any gifts, but I would have if I had, if I'd had more time. I would have knit everybody a sweater, but I can do that later. So okay, so I'll go on to the next thing. So Toscanini's pants. This is a quick story. And again, this is about how I'm the intersection of many different disciplines and many different interests, and how you can't separate your life from the sense of what your work is. Or for me, I can't separate my life from my work. I'm incapable of doing that. So this is the story. My family came from Belarus, and they left in 1933, and they took the SS Polonia to what was then Palestine and is now Israel. So this is my mother in Tel Aviv. And at the same time in 1933, Bronislaw Huberman, who was a Polish violinist, realized that the future was getting extremely grim for the Jews in Eastern Europe, and he wanted to bring them out and start an orchestra in Palestine. So he brought hundreds and hundreds of musicians, convinced them to come to this fledgling country, not even a country yet, and to create an orchestra. So he at the time asked the greatest conductor in the world, Arturo Toscanini, to come and conduct. So Arturo Toscanini was at this point also becoming very vocal in his anti-fascism. He was against Mussolini. He wouldn't go to Germany to perform for Hitler. And he was also, things were starting to get really hot for him too. Of course, even though he wasn't a Jew, but he was certainly an outspoken critic, and that's dangerous as well. So when Huberman invited Toscanini to come, he said yes. And he came to Israel in 1936-37, and he conducted the first performance of the, the Palestine Philharmonic. The entire world was watching this thing because this is really at the juncture of what's going to happen to Europe, what's going to happen to the world, what's going to happen to the Jews in Europe. And so Toscanini is saying, I'm here to say, I'm with you. And he wore this suit, okay, these pants and this jacket. Okay, so in 1954, we leave Israel, and we come to New York, and here we are with our wonderful, beloved possession. My parents are nowhere to be seen. We only will be photographed with the TV. And you know, it's also funny, we had unlimited TV watching. So Toscanini comes around that time, a few years more or less, and he also moves to Riverdale, to the Bronx, but he lives in a little bit different place. He lives in Wave Hill. So a few years pass. I'm studying music, and I go to the High School of Music and Art. And at the High School of Music and Art, we have a place where we're going to meet. When you say, meet you at the Toscanini, that was our meeting place. It was a bust of Toscanini. Okay, so cut to last year, and Rick and I are having coffee and looking at the obits and such, and then he says to me, Toscanini's pants are for sale. They're up for auction. So I was like, I was out of there so quickly. It was something, and I went to the auction house. The jacket and the pants that Toscanini wore to conduct the Israel Philharmonic, the anti-fascist pants. And so I thought, this is an amazing moment. I think that I have to have these pants. I have to have these pants. But of course, I wasn't sure because other people would come and bid for them, and there was other bidding, and it was really tense. But I got them. So now they hang in my living room. They're a reminder of that, I don't know, I love pants, I love Toscanini, I love music, and, I love that the Metropolitan Opera thought they didn't need the pants, but I own his pants, and they're beautiful pants, too. So because the Elements of Style was a project that, again, it came to me because I collect a lot of grammar books and language books and foreign phrase books, and I found a copy of The Elements of Style one summer, in a yard sale, and thought this is an extraordinarily funny book, and everybody should know about it, and it should get more attention. So I was able to contact the different people who were involved and get the rights to the book. And then to do paintings, and I think this is probably, well, I don't know if this is my favorite, but this is one of my favorites, but the sense that the eccentricity of the sentences, the cinematic quality of the sentences, the absurdity of it all. Polly loves cake more than she loves me. It was a unique egg beater. All of these beautiful, beautiful sentences. He noticed a large stain right in the middle of the rug. And none of us is perfect. And there is my Russian man right in the middle of there with a so true. And various people that I encounter, and this broken chair, that my sorrow is that I'm not bringing all those broken chairs home. I should have, and then just to show you the last page is the copyright page. And again, I did this with Peter Buchanan Smith, who's a wonderful designer, and we talked about the nature that you really should try not to get bored. Not being bored is a real motivator. So the copyright page is fractured and broken and illegible and really annoying for anybody who needs any information. But it's one of the things that I like to think about, that you really don't take anything for granted and just do what you need to do. So here is my mother. Again, she only wore white. And this summer, my son Alex Kalman has a small museum on Cortlandt Alley in New York called Museum, twins in the front, in a defunct elevator shaft. And we opened the annex, which is the closet, the replica of my mother's underwear closet. So I think that any of you who are coming to New York should come. It's open on weekends, and I sweep the Cortlandt Alley because that's my contribution to New York City, to say that it's important to keep the city clean. And it's just a simple replica of her West Village closet. But it's an extraordinary thing, and we love it very much. So everybody's welcome to come, and I often serve cookies there, and other things, and port. So in the morphing of things, I curated a show for the Cooper Hewitt based on their collection, and it became a book called My Favorite Things. And again, it starts, for me, the memories that we have of our families told to us, intended, are things that really propel me in my story. So this is a story of my father falling out the window in a gray suit, but he didn't get hurt. He bounced. And then I go on to tell a story about Joseph Beuys and his gray suit and how cultural intersections can happen everywhere, all the time, and all you have to do is just be happy to receive them. So I chose things that were really, this really interesting, this peevish Coptic face, beautiful hats, the Breton hats, painting of Lewis Carroll's, and Alice in Wonderland is really an interesting counterpoint to all of this. And of course, I use photography, and there's a photograph on the left of Bresson, on the right, Diane Arbus. This is another thing I have on my wall, because I put this in the show also. But I'm very poorly today and very stupid and hate everybody and everything. One lives only to make blunders. And then he goes on, it's Charles Darwin speaking. And I think one lives only to make blunders is something that resonates in my head day and night and day. So the project that I'm working on now, the book that's coming out now, is about a dog, beloved dog. And again, it's about how do we navigate this life? How do we deal with sorrow? How do we deal with the fragility and the vulnerability of every single day that we're alive? So one of the things that we do is we get a dog. And even though I say here that before I fell in love with dogs, I didn't trust them at all, and I thought clearly it was common knowledge that if you turned your face away, the dog would rip your head off, or at least rip your face off, or something like that. So this is a compilation. This is a tribute to a memoir and a compilation of the many dogs that I've encountered over the years, both in books and also in the real world. And this is the actual dog, Pete, too. And so I'm going to end with another project at the Cooper Hewitt. This is Lincoln's dog, by the way. He was a cross-eyed dog named Fido. But I'm going to end with talking a little bit again about Abraham Lincoln. So for this show at the Cooper Hewitt, which closed last June, Nico Muley and I again collaborated, and we created a song cycle based on the objects in the room. And one of them was Lincoln's watch, which had never left the Smithsonian. It's a national treasure. It hadn't ticked in 150 years. And what you're going to hear now, and so what happened is that we had the watch repaired. It was ticking for about 15 minutes. It was recorded. The recording was sent to Nico. Nico created a song using text that I wrote. And what you're going to hear is sound history that you will have never heard before, and maybe some of you have seen this before, but you'll never hear again, because it could only tick for a few minutes. It's so fragile. So this is what he heard when he opened his watch in the morning. There's something very, very tender and moving about it. And also, the song is Take Your Time. Thank you very much.